Welcome to the JAMODI podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders. So let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is JAMODI, just a matter of doing it. Coaches, the JAMODI podcast is powered by Shoot 360. The future of basketball has arrived in Dallas-Fort Worth. Shoot 360 combines the latest sports technology with the fundamentals of basketball skill development. The result is a one-of-a-kind video game-like basketball program designed to improve your shooting, dribbling, and passing. Visit shoot360dfw.com to learn more and register for your free 1-hour workout evaluation. Shoot 360, the future of basketball is here. You know, that competitive fire that, you obviously have, you can just hear it in the way you talk about the game and coaching. And when you were right in the middle of it, how did you balance the competitive fire, you're competing your team versus theirs, but also yourself versus the other guy over there? But how did you balance that with still the coaching fraternity and the relationships that I think are so special that we build by doing this? What was that balance like for you?
I always thought it was pretty easy because as long as a guy wasn't an ass on the other end, I'm cussing my players or being disrespectful or pressing up 60 with 8, just ridiculous things. Then I always felt like that he's not an issue. My issue is me and my issue is my team. I don't care that much about them. And at the end of the day, I cared about the relationship because everyone knows that I'm a very fiery person, but I'm not disrespectful to the other coach for any reason. And I'm always going to walk the line at the end. I'm always going to shake hands, and I'm always going to congratulate you unequivocally. I'm not going to come out whining. Oh, refs suck today. I'm mad. Oh, man. Yeah, well, nice game, Matt. Refs blew. And I'm not doing that because that's really, really rude. And because I know I'm a little bit of a polarizing type of a person, I like throwing you off by being really humble because from a distance, I always tell people, there's 30 frames of video in a second, right? There's 30 snapshots per se, right? And if you judge anybody by the snapshot of their life, you're probably not being fair because my best snapshot, I'm Mother Teresa, and my worst one, I'm Attila the Hun. Mm-hmm. Well, if you level it out by watching the whole video, and I know from a distance I can be that person. I like throwing you off because I am a respectful person, and I think you should care about your reputation because you only have one. Yeah. You only got one name, and there are people out there that don't like me, but it was very highly unlikely that it was just because I don't care what you think of me, so I just went off. It was probably because you don't like me. Well, that's okay. Didn't you learn that as a basketball player? You can't make everyone happy.
Yeah, it's an important lesson you got to learn, especially your coaches. You can't. Coach Bliss played me 40 minutes against TCU. 1 week later, 47 seconds against SMU. And I did nothing wrong in that week to change that, have that dramatic of a change in playing time. Right. And I had to make the choice. This was as a college player of, while I care what he thinks, I'm also not going to try to understand every decision he makes because I'll end up going crazy. I'm just going to have to worry about staying consistent and working hard.
Right. Well, and I always tell people, I said, Tony Romo would be an unemployed truck driver back in Charleston, Illinois, if he hadn't been, when he had his hat on backwards, some gruff guy from New Jersey goes, Romo, get your ass out there. And he was ready to go.
Yeah.
When preparation meets opportunity, that's where success happens. So you got to prepare yourself for it, but you got to be ready when the opportunity comes because you don't get that many of them. And that goes back to my story about when I said, he goes, you think you can win? And I said, you think I can't? And I didn't mean to be arrogant, but you don't get, and what I said to him was, I said, the likelihood is I'll probably never get a chance to go back again. Well, I didn't. Tommy went once. Joe Rushy, Tyrese Maxey, the kid that plays for the Sixers, right? Remember his father? You ever met his dad, Tyrone?
No.
Tyrone played in the DISD back in 88, 89, same time as Baron Brown and Thomas Hill. And I got my start in basketball in Dallas because they just opened up AAU basketball. In 1987, I started working at Oak Cliff, so I was working with these kids. And Tyrone Maxey, the father, made a half-court shot for Brian Adams. That was when it was Brian Adams and Kenyon Martin and all those guys were down there, Michael Jacks. And he hit a half-court shot to end Thomas Hill and Baron Brown's senior season. They were supposed to win state 3 years in a row. They were loaded. Well, they got there 1 year, and their point guard missed a couple of critical free throws, and that happens. Then the guy makes a half-court shot, and that happens. And, that's why you got to, the most hollow thing in the world is coulda, woulda, shoulda. And that's why I really encourage people. I don't watch a lot of video after we lose unless like the last loss. I won't watch that
The
game.
last one. Yeah. Yeah.
What are you getting from that besides pissed off that the refs blew the block charge again?
Yeah.
You know what you're going to do and go into the offseason with a grudge. I mean, to the extent, and that's why, like, I get on my wife about second guessing because I'm sure as a player and a coach, you just absolutely detest being second guessed because you got to live in the moment. You got to make a decision, right? And she goes, "Well, I'm not second guessing." I said, "Well, you kind of are because you're kind of talking about what I should have done." And I said, "Only to the degree that what you say to me will change my behavior the next time. That's the part I want you to make me review. The part about I'm an idiot because I should have done what you said after the fact because you had the benefit of hindsight, just shut up. Just shut, that, and that goes to video. You know, to the degree that this clip can make you a better player in the next game. Well, last game, just get over it. You know, win or lose, go eat dinner with your team. Don't act different when you lose than when you win. You know, in fact, if you could think about this, if you intentionally humbled down when you won, you intentionally kept it up when you lost, wouldn't you keep things a lot more balanced for your team? I mean, they're already psychotic teenagers. Jesus, they're already emotional basket cases to begin with, right? So you're going to make it harder by yelling and screaming when it's bad and gloating when you win, you know? So I always had I had a high school coach that I always kept a pretty good balance that way. I admire the guys that keep that balance that way. And again, it comes back, I'll still yell at the ref. I'm still a type A personality, but in the moment of, do I hammer his butt or I put my arm around him? Come on, man. He ain't trying to miss.
Yeah.
Coach, he ain't trying to miss that free throw.
That's a great reminder.
You know, and if the best you got is out there making a mistake, that's the best you got. It's the best you got. Right?
That's a good point. Question for you that I was thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
So you win at Plano, and then you take over years later. You take over Grand Prairie, and I think they were coming off of like a 0-26 year or something like that.
They went over, yeah.
Yeah. What was that like? I mean, coming from the success that you've had, taking over a program, not like some guys that take over and have some instant success because of others' work or stuff that a foundation that's already been there. Really, no foundation. What was that like?
Well, it was fun in the sense there was no pressure because Troy Matthews, the greatest athletic director in the history of high school basketball. Man, I love Troy Matthews. And Troy treats you like a college coach. He gives you resources because basically if he gives you resources, he takes away your excuses. Right. Not that you're looking to make excuses, but the cheap AD says, do it in spite of all the things I'm going to say no to. And he says, okay, go do it because I'm going to say yes. So that was cool. Had a great gym. They welcomed me because, we'd won state and they were horrible. So that from that part I loved. I loved the parents didn't give me any help, but that was the saddest part because the parents were just very uninvolved in my players' lives. Socioeconomics were really bad as far as that goes. And so it was really hard. And I had to make talking about self-awareness, I had to make sure I didn't come across as condescending to those kids. I never talked about Plano, never compared to those Plano kids. They don't need to hear that crap. They already know they suck. They already know that the 0-26 is about rock bottom, And I remember when we won our first game, it was funny, like second or third game, we won a game, and they're out there dogpiling. I look at Barron. I coached Barron when he was a junior in high school in the summer, right? I've known him forever. I said, Barron, this is kind of embarrassing. I said, but what the hell?
There's a purity though there. Like there's a purity that in high school sports you don't always get to see. And in that moment, I think you saw it.
Yeah. Well, it was cool because I always knew that no one was going to give me hell. I mean, like I said, the coolest thing about GP was part of the coolest thing was the parents didn't mess with me. And then probably the saddest thing was the parents didn't mess with me. I never had any conflict with as far as that went. But then in the last 5 or 6 years, I mean, I'm going to say something just straight up because he doesn't run you, and he sure the hell don't run me. Charlie Brightup's a coward. He's an absolute coward because we all know back in the 90s, there was a school down Oak Cliff that got caught red-handed. He didn't do anything. Then we also know somebody got caught red-handed up in the white suburbs, and they didn't do anything. And now we know someone down there on Highway 20, a little further east, they're cheating, ain't doing anything. And then Charlie has the audacity to act like he clutches his pearls. Oh, an ex-offender, you reap what you sow. And it really sucks because there's a high school portal, dude. And that's undignified for a guy my age. And this is not ego talking. This is just a grown man versus kid talking. This is just, I'm not tail don't wag the dog talking. The idea though that I have to go recruit my own middle school kids, that I have to re-recruit my own players, that's ridiculous. And guess what? There are no attendance zones. It don't matter. You've heard so many crazy, stupid stories that come out of these recruiting factories. And what do they all call fall back on? He was being bullied or he feared for his safety. right? And
Mm.
it's sad. It's sad because it's harder to coach the way you want to coach, and that's why you have to have players who trust you.
Yeah, and Jeff Clarkson had a great point. He's at Prestonwood now, and so even
Right.
though we're both at private schools, the amazing thing that a lot of people don't know is that we're not allowed to recruit either. Like, we're not allowed to go out and reach out to people, find them, grab them, and induce them or entice them to come to our school for athletics. And the big difference is there truly is no zones. They can live anywhere and come to our schools.
Right. So
But yeah,
no, you're barred by your school from doing it. Not only that, but you'd have to account for the fact that you have to pay for the education. But think how easy it is to recruit public schools.
Yeah,
All you got to do is find a dumpy apartment address. You don't have to live in the apartment.
Yeah.
All you got to do is say you live in the apartment. But Charlie's going to come knock on your door. And I'm sorry if I'm being rude, but I have no respect for that because I watched too many guys work too hard. I mean, when Kate Cunningham left Bowie, one of my best friends is Alan Gratz. He's the guy that hired me after I got fired at Plano before I got the TP job, right? And him going to Montverde, that's a little different. I kind of get that part. But the idea that you're getting cherry picked from the moment. I mean, like when Lake Highlands lost this year in the playoffs, the first thing I said was, cynically, of course, because I'm Irish, I'm from Chicago, and dead people vote. So I looked at him, I said, the most difficult job for that coach in the offseason? And I said, what's that? I said, going to keep the assistant coach, Trey Johnson's dad, hired. Because everybody in town, let's go back to a little bit east on Highway 20, is going to offer the dude a job because the kid comes free. Okay, technically that's legal. All right, come on, man.
Yeah,
just all that.
I do. I like you though. I do love the purity of it. Kind of the way. I mean, it felt like at the Colony back in the day. Like we had grown up here. I mean, I did move down from Pennsylvania before my freshman year in high school to start at the Colony. But to Coach Thomas's credit, I was 5'3" with a flat top, size 13 shoe, not athletic. For him to have the foresight at that point to say this kid's going to be really good, like that would be incredible. He needed to go and
how much credit do you give Tommy Thomas for his development in you?
Yes,
his persistence. Because all those players didn't come to me as finished products. Probably the only one that I ever had that was pretty much a finished product, just stay out of the way, was John Robertson, and he was such a good kid. He let me coach him.
Yeah,
but the rest of those guys, they weren't finished products. You guys weren't either. And also think about this. Think if you could take the greatest work ethic of any teammate you ever had and put it into the most talented, lazy teammate you ever had and ask where he'd be today. Right. So, but which can you control? You can control your work ethic. You can't control your head. You can control how hard you worked, but you still had to have a guy who believed in you a little bit. And going back to compare the Colony to Plano, which, sit right next to each other virtually, is that there was a sense of community.
Yeah,
they were all kids who grew up.
And that's what's missing now, especially I feel like in DFW, the private school world. It's missing just because these kids don't live by each other. It's not a city that they're a part of. I'll tell you, one of the coolest places I ever felt like what we're talking about is in Iceland when I played for Njarðvík. The cool thing about that Icelandic league was it was little towns that just had a team named after their little town, and your teammates were the plumbers, the electrician, the teachers at the town that could also play. And then you went together, the whole town drove down 15 miles to the other. It was because I didn't even experience that as much at the Colony of everything. It's like Friday night football a little bit, but
shut down the store.
Yeah, but with basketball and where I'd go to the video store where they used to buy VHS tapes or rent VHS tapes or whatever or DVDs, and I go, and if we had won, man, like I could grab whatever I want for free. If we had lost, though, I could tell from those people like it was all my fault as the American. But my whole point, it is lost a little bit, but that's going, kind of full circle back to, and real quick to my point with Jeff Clarkson was, he said, good point, is you almost have to recruit your own players at this point.
Yeah.
Season's over. You have to recruit them.
I'm sorry. If you got a reason, if you got a problem, we should have already known about it, but we shouldn't be having exit interviews with every single returning player. So we can, what's next? Are we going to have to do an NIL package for every returning high school sophomore in case he doesn't make the varsity? We want to make sure he's rich before he goes to college. Yeah. Jesus Christ, come on, man, give me a break. And it's really, really frustrating because back to public school. So you have the disconnect with privates because the kids don't live in the neighborhood. But see, the problem now is what people don't realize is every time somebody goes off and cherry picks a kid and brings them in, he's replacing somebody, and that somebody is a local kid. So that's why usually the recruiters can't last long term, because
that's a good point. I haven't thought of that. Yeah.
Yeah, somebody's getting. I used to always tell my players there's 3 numbers that are incontrovertible: 1, 5, and 160. There's 1 basketball. There will never be a second. There's 5 players. Never be a sixth. There's 160 minutes, and you guys got to figure out how to do that. Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday is how you figure out how I split the pie on Tuesday and Friday. You figure that out with a little bit of game situation factored in. But for the most part, I mean, I love to play everybody. If I have a chance to play everybody, but there are 30-30 guys. You know what 30-30 is, right? You only play when we're up 30 or down 30.
It's 30, yeah.
30, that's just what you are, right? We had a kid that played on our state championship team. He's one of the founders of Dude Perfect. You know that crazy?
Yeah.
He's a gazillionaire. And his dad never liked me very much, right? And Cody's a nice kid, but wasn't a very good player. So one day his dad, about 2 years after we win state, walks up and tells me, "Hey, coach, I just want to let you know I forgave you." And I'm thinking inside, you pompous, pretentious idiot. Who are you to forgive me for anything? But of course, I played along. What's that for? Oh, I just want to tell you, I forgave you for not playing Cody 1 minute in the state championship game. We were down 10 points at halftime to the defending state champs. We were down 7 at the end of the third quarter to the defending state champs. We had to go on the defensive run of all time and survive 6 missed free throws to win on the craziest missed shot in the history of the world. If you decided to play 1 possession, we wouldn't have a ring. And I just did I just really hear that? But the crazy part was, it was this like sort of predated what's going on now. It didn't bother the kid; it bothered the dad.
Yeah.
And that's what. And what really stinks is now that the inmates are running the asylum completely. Factor in football coaches who probably aren't your biggest fan in the first place. Now you have pushy parents, and then that's amplified by this generation's a little worse. Now COVID, it's even worse. Now everything's political, and I can get everyone fired, and I can tell you what book to have in the library, and I can tell you what the curriculum is. So now every single conflict is somebody trying to hatchet your job. And that's ridiculous. And I think if those parents would ever take a look at themselves, they'd be so ashamed.
I think that's where
I fired in my life for something that happened on their job. Never, not once.
And I think that's where the peace of mind we have to take as coaches now is, I have a few things just kind of rattle off in my head. One, you're never going to please everybody. And if you try to do that, you're going to be miserable. 2, winning is not the only thing, because you're hopefully building relationships that, and I can tell that you've already done with so many players, relationships that last. You're invited back to their wedding. You're teaching them life lessons through a game. That's really important. But then the last thing is, winning better be what you're trying to do. Because I think when you try to please everybody and you think too much about playing little Timmy in the championship game because you want little Timmy to feel something, you actually are disrespecting the process and the hard work that all of those other players have put in. So it's been a journey for me, because I've even dabbled with some of those styles of play, like a Grinnell style, which is 5 in, 5 out. Everybody on the roster plays. There's like a purity and a piece of my heart that loves that, because it's a high school. I had a dad tell me one time, does it really matter? It's 5A taps. It's high school. And I get that. Like, ESPN's not watching our games, but I kind of came back at him with, but we're also called to be excellent in what we do. And if winning is the goal, then every decision I make
has to be toward that.
Has to be towards that.
Right. Well, and the thing about it too is, I mean, do we want participation medals and orange slices? Because I don't. What makes me feel real good is like when I was going back and forth with John one day, and just kind of unsolicited, he says, "Coach, I just want to say thanks for always being around to give me and Joe and Bo and the guys good advice." That kind of thing, because they don't have to say it. And it's easy to say, well, that's because he's your best player you ever had. And he was. Well, you don't remember Bo, the Nigerian kid, but he's 36 years old. And it's funny because people will say, "How are you and Inman so close?" You got a son who's a freshman at Plano West, right? And I used to have to ride Bull. Remember, I told you the story about when Matt was cussing Bull about,
Yeah.
right? He's the kind of kid you had to ride his butt. You couldn't go softer. He'd walk all over you, right? And then if he walks on me, I can't coach the rest of the team. So I had to be on him out real hard. And he just respects that. So 20 years later, people are like, how are you guys such good friends? Because he basically rode your ass the whole time. And he said, Inman told me the truth. Right. And he's not there to make you happy in the moment. And that's one thing, that's one of the uncomfortable truths as a coach you have to live with. You got to find a way to discuss it with people because they're not mind readers. And you got to be able to explain it without malice, but you got to be able to explain, like you said. I mean, if the goal is for everyone to get the equal slice of the pie, then your son should play equal minutes. But if the goal is to win, then you have to trust me that we're working toward an end. And that's the hard part. Because, and that's why you find out if you lose a few games early in the season, you find out who the second guessers are. Because I've had kids come up and say, well, coach, we're losing with him. And, I'll be indelicate here where I was more delicate there. I'd say, yeah, but we'd be losing by more if you were in. Because he's still better than you. I'm sorry. What do you want me to do? You go to practice.
Truth. There's truth right there. Yeah.
Go to practice. Hey, Gory Johnson used to coach out of Kimball one time. This lady, she gets out. She's one of the screaming. There's that one screaming woman, and she's in every gym in America, and she seems to follow you around. The one who just has to have every single thing she thinks heard by everybody in the gym. So his mom's going bat crap crazy, and she comes up to Gory and she wants to talk to him about her son not shooting a basketball. He said, ma'am, before we talk about that, I want you to come to 2 practices, okay? So the lady comes to the first practice, and she comes to about the first 5 minutes of the second practice and got up and left, and she never heard from him again. Later on, he bumps into her, and she's, what happened? Well, I kind of came to realize why my son don't shoot the ball in games.
Let's
practice every day, lady. We're not trying to be average. I'm not trying to play second fiddle players. I mean, and how many times did people tell you that they played a little basketball back in the day? Well, I watch Law and Order every night, but I don't think I represent myself in court, and I don't drill my own teeth when I go to the dentist. And even though I'm pretty sure I know which tooth hurts, geez, well, I played a little ball back in the day. Well, how little did you play? How far back in the day?
And even to that point, that thinking is flawed because you and I both know too. There's some great players that aren't great coaches. They're great skill. They're great players that can't teach skill. One of my biggest issues early on in coaching was that I could still play because I would think in my head I could do this better than they're doing it right now, or I would skip steps in teaching because I already knew what it should look like.
Right. No, it's really easy to have that happen. The Showtime show with Jerry West. And they say there's a lot of inaccuracies here, so I'm not quoting that it's the truth, but the scene is Jerry West comes up to Jerry Buss, and he says, listen, we got everything we need here, except there's one problem. And what's that? He goes, me. He goes, I sit over here, and I'm just freaking miserable. He goes, I look out at those guys, and all I can say is, why are you me? Well, you're Jerry West. You're the logo. There's not even a second you, much less 5 of you. So, I mean, to the point of, average players being better coaches, I mean, who would be a better coach, you or Darren or Bracey, who had to work harder to get where they got? They were able to skip a few steps. No bad on them.
Yeah,
but you had to learn every step. In fact, but you brought up a good point too. My wife has learned to swim, and she's African. She always fell into that old black people can't swim crap. I said, if you can hold your breath, you can swim. So we started working on it, right? And what happened was that and riding a bike. She'd never swam, and she hadn't ridden a bike in years. So the first time we swam, I didn't go back to real basic, simple things like cupping your fingers or pulling the water, just a little simple stuff because it's so fundamental, so rudimentary. I don't know how to tell someone to breathe. I don't know why I breathe. I just do. Well, that goes to the point where sometimes if you're too advanced of a player, you can't, you're Jerry West yelling at 5 guys who can't be you. Well, you're a Hall of Famer and they're just average pros. So it's really, really difficult. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you can do. It matters what they do. It doesn't matter what you know. What is what they do? What does it really matter? What they do. And that's why I hate the coaches who are finger pointers. And that's why I used to love saying this. Like we go out and lose a game. And I say, guys, listen, man, I'm going to go out there and talk to this reporter. And I'm going to tell him that it was all my fault. I didn't have you guys ready. I said, you know better than that. We went over this stuff. We made some mistakes. But I got you. And I really think that's important that you do that because then down the road, they ain't throwing bombs at you. But if you think you're going to throw bombs, in fact, I learned that a long time ago. The newspaper doesn't really come into play now. It's social media. But if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything. Only use the media to amplify positive things. because somehow if they read it in the newspaper back in the 80s and 90s, it was the gospel truth, even though it was the same thing your coach had been saying every day. If somebody else says it, I'll give my wife a hard time. I'll give her a compliment. She doesn't accept compliments. My wife's beautiful, but she doesn't accept compliments. Well, then someone else will be, and she'll be really nice. I said, so a stranger can get you. You're going to ride my butt? Come on, man.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the JAMODI podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.